What's going on, Junkie Nation? Gorgeous George and Goes are back. We got a legend here with us. It's former UFC middleweight champion Rich Franklin, who's currently a vice president for One Championship. Welcome back, Ace. How you doing?
What's going on, man? It's good to be back on the show. I'm good, man. I'm good.
Good to have you. Looks like you've been stateside, and it looks like you've been jacking some weights and kind of doing some traveling. Are you back now permanently, or was this just kind of like an extended stay?
I'm not sure yet. I mean, I'm obviously still working for One. I came back with the whole situation with COVID and everything that's going on. I've been working for One for the last 8 years. I've been working for One based in Singapore for the last 4 years, but I've also had, 4.5, but I've had the ability to travel back and forth. Now, with the current situation, it makes travel really difficult. I mean, particularly for us, because Singapore, I live in Cincinnati, the geographical, like the size of Singapore from geography is about the same size as Cincinnati with the 275 loop, like the highway loop that we have around it. So geographically, it's not a large country. And when you talk about borders and stuff like that, like the traveling in and out right now, particularly on that side of the world, where you have these high population densities in places like Bangkok and Manila and so forth, travel is really tricky and somewhat restricted at this point in time. So getting to and from Singapore back to the U.S. was quite difficult for me. So I initially came back to the U.S. just for personal reasons. I have land here, property, my house that I live in, and things I needed to take care of. But at the same time, because One Championship did that string of shows on back in April on TNT, and that was our first foray into the U.S. market, truly. Now we're looking at actually bringing shows to U.S. soil because we had broadcasted those events from Singapore.
Oh, wow. That's a lot. And it sounds like you're kind of leaving the door open that you can go back, but it also sounds like you've been doing some work here. Over the summer, we saw One Championship get approved in Colorado, and then I was following you on social media. You're getting a lot of tread on them feet, a lot of walking going around. You visited a lot of MMA gyms. Can you tell us a little bit about the walk first, and then we'll migrate over to MMA. Overcomer team. What was going on with that?
Yeah, I didn't realize what you were referring to at first. So yeah, on my socials. So the Overcomer team, this local guy, his name's Cody O'Connor. He comes to me. He had Ewing sarcoma cancer when he was 14 years old. He's 25 now. It took him a little over 6 years to battle through this cancer, and he had a cyst in his leg that they end up having to remove. And when they remove that, they end up having to take a bone out of his leg, restructured his entire ankle. He's got one ankle that looks like a normal ankle, and the other one is about the size of like his wrist. And so he was told he'd never walk normally again. I mean, he could walk, to and from the grocery store to get in and out of a car. But like, for example, to spend an entire day at a zoo or something like that, he would never be able to walk normally. He'd be in braces or with supports, whatever. And so he was determined at that point in time to walk. He was like, you know what? I'm going to prove everybody wrong. I want to walk across the country. He had actually trained himself and was able to walk almost from our hometown here in Cincinnati to downtown, walked almost the distance of a marathon. And then during the quarantine and lockdowns of COVID, he was hiking at a park off pavement and ended up twisting his ankle really bad and it's setting back. So he came to me and he said, Rich, if there's anybody that can get me back on track faster, it's you. And I want to walk across the entire country. And I was like, what? So I said, yeah, man, I'll help you. I'll help you out. And then when I saw his gait when he actually walked, which I posted a video of on my Instagram, and you can see how much he favors his right leg from that bone being removed. I mean, they removed the fibula, the complete bone. And so when I saw that walk, I was like, wow, this is going to be much tougher than I thought it was. But he started that walk back June 16th in Times Square, and he's now passing through Kansas. He was back in Cincinnati today. They dropped a GPS location, left off, came back to Cincinnati for some business that he had to do for some charitable stuff for the Overcomer team. And now he's headed back to Kansas today. So I'm actually here in like a week and a half or 2 weeks. I'm going to meet him out in Kansas, and we're going to end up going to a Kansas City Chiefs New York Giants game on the 1st of November. So that'll be pretty cool.
Man, you guys are gangsters. I mean, seriously, from New York to Kansas, I wouldn't even want to drive that far.
Hold on. Don't say you guys are gangsters. Like, he's a gangster. I walked one day with him, and this kid is missing a bone in his leg, and we were walking, and I posted a video of us walking on my Instagram, and I was literally like breathing heavy. I'm like, dude, do you maintain this pace all day? Actually, this is my slow pace. And we were walking up this hill. Of course, this was in Cincinnati, and we chose I think the hottest day in July or whenever it was. It was 100 plus degrees that day. But man, I mean, he sets a pace and he's on it. And so that guy's Gangster. I'm complaining about having to drive like 8.5, 9 hours out to Kansas City to meet up with him. And he's walked all the way across the country. So I've spent maybe just a couple random days walking with him. But yeah, man, it's a really, really, really cool story. And he's raising money. You can go to overcomerteam.com, or you can check out, I don't know what his exact Instagram handle is, but it's like Overcomer Team. But he's raising money for families that are affected by cancer, because he is when he was battling cancer when he was a teenager, it financially pretty much crumbled his family. Not just the medical bills themselves, but like his parents weren't able to work. People had to go to the hospital with him while he was doing chemo. And there's a lot of stuff that comes into fighting cancer that people don't realize. And so the fund that we have set up is designed to actually financially help families. And so through this walk so far, I think he's helped 2, maybe 3 families, like with complete expenses and stuff like that. So it's, the kid's a stud, man. He's a good guy too. It's just like he's on a mission right now. So, and he's sitting there talking like, all right, what bigger things can we do next year? I'm like, bro, get through this walk. let's just get to Cali first, and then let's discuss that.
That's super motivating and incredible that a professional athlete like you were holding him up. I guess if you weren't along for the ride, maybe he'd already be in Colorado instead of Kansas. Just kidding.
No. I think if I went along for the ride, he'd probably be like somewhere in New Jersey right now. Like if I was walking with him, that's how slow I'd be walking.
Yeah. But speaking of Colorado, I was just throwing the joke into segue into what happened in Colorado in the summer. One championship got your rule set approved for, the engagement with down opponents, whether it be kicks or knees. And I wanted to see if you wanted to talk about it, because we obviously your guys are laying the foundation for going to Colorado. And I know you got 6 events still planned for the rest of this year, but can you give us a forecast of how important Colorado will be to one championship?
Yeah, Colorado's been really important for us, actually, and we've been able to basically use that as a building block. I've gone to several other athletic commissions at this point in time, and believe it or not, I have approval in several states at this point. And so, yeah, our schedule next year, like I mentioned earlier, we opened up on TNT in April this year. We had a really good run, and the interesting thing about our rules is that it's amazing how many avid mixed martial arts fans there were watching one championship at the time when Adriano Moraes defeated Demetrius Johnson, and was surprised when Demetrius got kneed when he was on the ground. And just because we say it at every broadcast, and DJ had actually been pretty outspoken about the fact that he was supportive and in favor of that particular rule per se. But with the rule set comes not just the obvious things that people see is like, oh, you can knee a downed opponent to the head, like in the U.S. audience isn't used to seeing that. But there are a lot of other things that come with our rule set. For example, we do like fight week CT scans, which I think we're probably the only major organization in the world that actually does that. All organizations require like head scans, MRIs, or CTs, or whatever during your medicals, and which we require as well. But we also get our athletes, it's built into their fight week schedules, is that they go back to the hospital during fight week and get CT scanned to make sure that something didn't happen in the approaching weeks of the fight. We also have our hydration protocols, which I'm a huge fan of, and I can get into that both on a professional level of me working for this organization as well as a personal level, because I came up through the sport when cutting was not only the norm but expected, and I was doing 20+ pound cuts all the time. I see our athletes walking around during fight week, and they are drinking water, eating food, chewing on pineapple and fruit and stuff, and just looking happy. And I'm like, you should be miserable right now, because that's how I was during my fight weeks. But then on top of it, with the rule set, we have our entire judging and scoring criteria, which is different. It's very, I guess you can call it cutting edge. I don't, but basically we don't judge the fights on a round by round 10-point must system. We judge them in their entirety. So we look at the fight as basically one big round in essence. It's kind of like, I guess if I could use an analogy, this is the best way I can explain it. Imagine going to a baseball game and watching a baseball game, and let's say that 2 teams are playing, and one team scores a run in the first inning, scores a run in the second inning, and then nobody scores any runs until the 9th inning, and then the other team scores 8 runs in the 9th inning. Well, they would win the game 8-2, but if you're doing this by the 10-point must system, then the other team won 2 innings to 1. And that's kind of how fighting is scored here in the U.S. So I'm a big fan of this other scoring system. I've experienced losses that I felt were not properly judged, particularly the 10-point must system in a 3-round match. I can understand how that would have developed in something like boxing. But no, the way that we judge our matches is that like once that first round ends at the 5th minute, when the second round begins at the 6th minute of the fight, it's just that the fight continues from there. So there is no such thing as stealing a round or, I think he stole that round with that takedown. No, you just continue the scoring based on our scoring criteria from that point on. So when you look at the rule system from an entire ecosystem, I think that the judging criteria that we use pushes the athletes to finish the fight. We have a yellow card and red card system that we use that was kind of similar to something like what Pride used. And, you can get yellow carded for anything from a foul to stalling in a match. And so it keeps the action moving. And I think that's part of the reason why we've had nearly an 80% finish rate in the organization.
You know what's funny is I got those right here.
Aha, nice.
I bought them the other day because I figured when I start interviewing people, if they say anything that just sucks, I'm going to give them a yellow, and then you know what I mean. But anyway, of course, I don't think we'll reach that with you. But so did they adopt the global rule set, and that covers everything you just said? The CT scan, the hydration. Colorado's all on board with the One Championship global rule set.
Yeah, they are. And so, everything's been approved. And so, I think Denver is going to be one of the major cities that we're looking at when we come here next year. Our schedule looks somewhat aggressive. I don't think I can publicly release how many events or any of that kind of stuff that we're planning on doing next year. But I would look for us to be here on the back half of the year. Nice.
All right. So lots to unpack here. If you want to add to the CT conversation, please do. I think it's super important. The same goes for hydration. Maybe a quick summary there. A lot of people need to understand how important this is, and maybe that would clear up the confusion of why DJ is regarded, I guess. We know him as a flyweight. He's still looked at as a flyweight, but he kind of does the walk around more at bantamweight. And DJ's actually told us, I'll never cut to 125 again. He feels great at 135, but I know a lot of people often get confused by the weight class situation. But I did also want to add, Mark Ratner, when he walked the red carpet at the Hall of Fame ceremony that they had for him the other day, he was talking about he wants to – I don't even think it had to do with bringing up one championship. It was just what are his goals and what did he want to do? And he says, this whole thing where I guess when the UFC visits different states and territories, they have – different sets. He wants to get all the commission. This is what I'm trying to say. He wants to get all the commissions on board with the same rules, whether it's 2 hands down or 1 hand down or, instant replay or not, things like that. What are your thoughts on that? Will Colorado be more of a home base for you guys, just one state, or do you want to take that global set and go to the other states as well that have, big respected commissions?
Okay, so you've asked me about 6 different things here. We touched on CTs, hydration, Colorado being a home state, commission consistency. Where do you want me to start on all this?
CTs.
Okay, let's start with CTs. Okay, let me back up and actually start with hydration, because I think hydration is important as it applies to CTs. So one of the things that One Championship does in their rule set is we have these hydration tests. Let me use myself as an example. You named DJ, and is exactly what ends up happening is you kind of end up shifting a weight class up. When I was competing at 185 pounds, I would typically walk around somewhere between 205 and 210, which means that I was cutting about somewhere between 20 and 25 pounds. Now, there are athletes that cut more than that and can cut more than that. And I even believe that from a cutting perspective, that the more you cut, the more it weakens you. Obviously, people will ask me all the time, are you stronger at 205 or are you stronger at 185? Well, obviously, I'm stronger at 205, but strength becomes relative because it's relative to your opponent. So the question is, am I stronger than my opponents at 205? Well, the answer in that case is no, because I typically walk around it when I was competing 210, maybe 212 tops. And for example, when I fought Forrest came in that fight weighing over 235. I came in that fight at right around 210. So I'm immediately giving up 25 pounds. So clearly I'm going to have trouble strength for strength with somebody like that. I will say this though, that there's a psychology that's been developed in weight cutting where it's like, man, if I can outweigh my opponent by 1 or 2 pounds or 2 or 3 pounds, then I have an advantage. But that's never the case when you're in the gym training. I've never looked at one of my training partners and thought like, I outweigh him by 3 pounds. I'm going to have an advantage in this grappling match right now, because you don't think that way, because you're fully hydrated and you're basically executing at your full potential. And so this is what One Championship's idea was. They said, look, when you dehydrate athletes, they're going to compete in a weakened state. And it's true. So what we want to do is we want to do a hydration protocol. Now, we looked at other hydration protocols, particularly the NCAA had good hydration protocols where they have at the beginning of the season, they have their athletes weigh in, they test, they check their weight, test their urine, and see what their urine is for their hydration testing. And basically we do the same thing. So we use an instrument called a refractometer. And we have our athletes come in, they take a piss test, they get their urine tested with a refractometer. This tests the specific gravity of the urine, getting a little scientific for some of the listeners here. And then that specific gravity, basically what it tests is how much solvent you have in your urine. The more solvents you have in your urine, the more dehydrated you are. And so it tests to make sure you're below a certain amount. If you make that hydration test, great, then your weight is checked. So you have to be on hydration and on weight simultaneously in our organization. Now, we have had weights that we've had fights that don't make weight. As long as an athlete makes hydration, you're fine. If you miss weight, then a catch weight can be negotiated, and we've had this happen. But even the catch weights have to be within a certain percentage. So somebody can't come in 10 pounds over and say, I missed weight, but I'm hydrated, so let's go ahead and fight, because it wouldn't be within a certain percentage of the upper limit of the weight class. So we do have safeguards against that. But in essence, what this does by testing somebody's weight and hydration simultaneously is it keeps them from doing these big 20-pound cuts. You can't just sit in a sauna like I did and dehydrate yourself. And we'll check the weight and hydration 2 days before the event. If you miss either weight or hydration on either of those 2 days, because it is possible to be hydrated and not weigh in properly, and it's possible to be on weight, but then you had to dehydrate yourself to get there. So you have to make both of them simultaneously 2 days before the fight and 1 day before the fight. If you miss either one, either day, then you get tested on the day of the event. If you miss weight, a catch weight can be negotiated. If you miss hydration, then you cannot fight. We just don't allow anybody to fight dehydrated. It's as simple as that. If you miss weight and you're hydrated, then we have rules in place where you automatically lose some of your purse, and that purse goes to your opponent. So that is kind of how our hydration protocol is handled. And I'm a big believer that every organization in the world should implement this. I believe that it affects the performance level of the athletes, first of all. It's not that I believe it, it just flat out does. Like an athlete cannot perform in a semi-dehydrated state as well as they can in a hydrated state. But on top of that, if you look at the way that the body rehydrates, like one of the last things to rehydrate in the body is the brain cavity. And we're in a sport much like football or anything else where concussions is a big deal here, things like CTE. And so when you look at a dehydrated state of a body and concussions, the effects of a concussion can be amplified when the brain is sitting in a dehydrated brain cavity, because the brain is not attached to anything. It just sits in fluid. So if this thing is dehydrated, like if you've dehydrated and in the process of rehydrating, you don't have this back to where it should be, then obviously you're just going to suffer more damage when you're taking hits to the head. So all around, that kind of ties into the whole idea of CT scans and all that kind of stuff as well. And so we've implemented these very strict protocols with CT scans and brain tumors and all this kind of stuff. And our doctor for One Championship works with the associate and ring-sided physicians, and so we've implemented these protocols, and they're quite strict with things like tumors and stuff like that. We've caught a lot of athletes with just different issues where, like, we don't want to put this person in the circle for obvious reasons, and coupling things like that with the dehydration is a major issue. So all this stuff is about protecting, obviously keeping athletes as safe as possible. And I believe that the comments from Mark Ratner are the same. Like he wants consistency across the board and to keep things as safe as possible. I think that when you look at our rule set, people are going to automatically zero in on, you can knee to the head to the ground. Like, that's not safe. But if you look at everything else that we have going on with our rule set, it's not necessarily the case. And as it pertains to knees to the head on the ground, I would argue, like, prove to me that you can actually generate more force to the head of a grounded opponent than you can standing. I've been kneed in the head on the ground. I don't know. So go back and watch my Anderson Silva fight, and you can see that not only is his knee coming up, but he's dragging my head into his knee, creating momentum in two directions, and generating a lot of force. So I don't see how. For me, I think that if you actually looked at pressure data or something like that, you would find that the impact on either one of those is basically about the same. You're not in any more danger just because you're on the ground. It is a bit shocking to the U.S. audience because they're just not used to seeing it. But when it comes to that kind of stuff, so yeah, I mean, obviously, I think that a lot of Ratner's comments come down to fighter safety. And that's one of the big pushes that we have in our organization, particularly when it comes to things like hydration and CT scans. And I think that when you look at some of the stuff that's been going on with weigh-ins, I mean, we've seen athletes across the board, like stumbling on scales, falling down, collapsing on stages, being rushed to hospitals. That's like, you really have to question how safe that actually is for an athlete.
You're very knowledgeable about all this, but more than anything, you're very passionate about it. I mean, one championship picked the right guy who's trying to lead this effort, man. Seriously, just listening to you talk about it is getting me to think that, is Andy Foster heard all this? I'm sure he has, right? And Mazzulli and all the bigwigs, at the different commissions in the states.
Here's the reality. Look at anybody who's sitting on the commission boards right now and all that kind of stuff. How many of these people have actually sat in a sauna for 2.5 to 3 hours cutting weight? How many of these people, like, I can show you a picture of my last weigh-in. Like, I can pull it up on my phone here and put it in front of the camera. And I mean, like, when you look at something like that, let me see if I can find this picture real quick. When you look at a picture of me at my last weigh-in, and what I looked like, it's almost scary to sit and think like, wow, like, people actually do this to themselves. Like, I don't even know how good this is going to translate onto the screen here, but wow. Like that's me at my last weigh-in. And I mean, my eyes are sunken in. Look at my knee bones. Like, I look like I'm on death row there.
And you were overseas too for that one, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I lost that match, but I don't think it had anything really to do with my weight cut. But the point is that I've lived both sides of this. I've lived this from the athlete side. I've done my time. I've cut my weight. I've sat in the saunas, and I can remember cutting weight for my Nate Quarry match. And this is one fight where I forgot my scale at home.
You stopped that one too early, by the way.
What? Yeah. No, but I left my scale. I accidentally left home, and I left my weigh-in scale at home. So when I was down in the locker room, I was dependent on the scale in the locker room. And I'll say this, like, on the back end of this, the reason why rules are set in place is actually to protect the athletes from themselves. Because as a young man, like, if you say walk through that brick wall, I'm going to walk through that brick wall, or I'm going to die trying, because that's what I do. At this age, you're like, walk through that brick wall. I'm going to be like, I got a smarter way, man. I got a rope, and I'm going to climb over that thing. Like, you get smarter as you get older. And so this is what happens with testosterone-filled young athletes. And so I was sitting in this sauna. I didn't have my scale on me. Unbeknownst to me, the scale at the MGM was broken. I overcut. Like, you can go back to that weigh-in, and I weighed in at 183. I mean, you're talking about like 2 pounds is huge. And I'm sitting in this sauna, and I'm literally like, I'll kill myself to make weight. And the scale in there was one of those medical detecto scales, the balance scale. And I wasn't dropping weight, and I'm sitting there. I'm like, guys, I don't know what I'm going to do. And it's the first time in my life where I said, I'm done. I'm dry, and I have nothing left in me. Like, if I sit in here any longer, I'm done. But I can remember sitting in that sauna, and I can't remember who the fighter was, but it was somebody else on the card. And I sat in this sauna for like an hour and a half straight. And he looked at me, and he was like, Rich, I don't know how you do that. And I straight up at the time, I looked at him and I said, that's why I'm champion. And that was the mentality that I had at that point in time. And it's the mentality that you need. It's the mentality that you need if you want to be if you want to be a champion, if you want to be part of an elite forces group in the military, anything like that. Like, you have to have that, like, win or die mentality. And that's why these rules and things like that are set in place. So if this is something that we can eliminate, we're just going to protect the athletes from themselves. And like I said, I've been on both sides of this. I've lived this as an executive, and I've lived this as an athlete. And seeing both sides of the coin, man, we have a much smarter way of going about these things.
Man, what a great conversation we're having here. We're reliving some history. Goz and I are in our 15th year of covering the sport. And as you're talking about a lot of this, it just opens up other questions. But I do want to let Goz get in. I just want to say one thing. I'm not fighter bashing. Nate Quarry has cracked that joke as well before about it ended too early. Goz and I were actually at the MGM for that one. I think that's where it was. vicious KO.
Dude.
But anyway, all right.
Listen, let me just say this. First of all, I love Nate to death, man. He's an awesome guy, and he's a great fighter too. And it's unfortunate that a highlight like that happens, because it ends up that will be the one highlight that he ends up getting remembered by. And I can remember that highlight being part of my career. And when that happened, I was so excited. Let me tell you, when you get on the other side of those highlights sometimes, and you're the guy that's getting kneed in the face, and that highlight gets shown all the time, then you understand what that means on the flip side of that. And so, Anyway, all that to say, man, I love Nate to death.
Yeah, we do as well, man. Zombie apocalypse forever. All right, Goes, why don't you have some questions for Rich? Because I have some follow-ups, but I don't want people to think you're just a mime sitting there on the side. Go ahead,
I'm like a cardboard cutout. Hey, Rich, this might actually be the first time when George asked you those 6 questions. I think you have every right to pull a yellow card on him. He's never pulled it out on himself.
I don't have any yellow cards here, man. So
this one's for me. But let me tell you something. When this is all over, I'm going to go back, because I could have sworn Rich said Forrest weighed in at 245. I weighed in at 210. I gave up 25 pounds. And I go, wait a minute. I might have to yellow card him, because guess what, folks? His specialty is math. But
I said 235.
Oh, you did? Okay. All right.
Yeah. And if I didn't, then I misspoke. And I don't know if I should be yellow carded for misspeaking. That's like accidentally kicking somebody in the groin rather than flagrantly kicking somebody in the groin. So, but actually in our organization, if you purposely kick somebody in the groin, that warrants a red card, not a yellow card.
True. Yeah. If George is wrong, it might warrant a red card. I might have to finish this by myself. But so Rich, you talked about some of these bad weight cuts that you've been a part of, but that you've also witnessed. Mm-hmm. I always tell people, I feel like these weight cuts, your body goes through some kind of trauma. And just because you're able to fight the next day doesn't mean there can't be some lasting effects of what you put your body through. Throughout some of these careers, especially early on, do you feel like some of these fighters later on in their lives may actually feel the repercussions of what they've done to their organs maybe a little later?
Absolutely, 100%. I think that, just on a personal level, I know people that have competed in bodybuilding shows, particularly women that compete in figure and bikini and physique, those kind of shows and stuff like that. And women that have gone through extreme weight cuts and those kinds of things. And on the back end, you see a lot of these people that have done this who have wrecked their metabolisms, for example. Now, that's just, obviously, if you're putting on weight, you have thyroid issues or something like that. Those are typically physical manifestations of other problems that you have inside the body. But a lot of things that you can't see until later on in the career that you'll never see the link to is that if you were cutting weight and you were suffering more severe damage from concussions, from blows to the head or something like that, then this, on the back end of life, when you start slurring your speech and slowing down and stuff like that, people are like, oh, well, he got hit a lot. Well, yeah, he did, or she did. But she or he also got hit in a dehydrated state or a semi-dehydrated state where it actually increased the severity of the concussion. And that, there's no real way to test this, because the human body, everybody's unique. Everybody's DNA is unique. So I might have a propensity for handling concussions fairly well, whereas somebody else, they get their first concussion and then suddenly they're shot. They have vertigo and things like that, and they can no longer take hits to the head. And so since everybody's is genetically unique, it would be difficult to compare this kind of data. But I will say that we know that scientifically and biologically, it's not healthy for the human body.
Rich, when you brought up knees to the grounded opponent, we've had this conversation so many times on our show. If that happened here in North America, the landscape, just the history of the sport would be completely changed, because there are so many different types of styles brought into MMA that I guess my question to you is there a particular skill set that you feel like would be put in check? Because the first thing I remember is back in Pride, if Mark Coleman didn't complete that takedown and there's a sprawl, you can guarantee a knee is probably going to come right to his head, right? I think it would change the thought process of a lot of fighters. To me, I feel like maybe wrestlers would be the ones that would be the most in check because of that, if you can't complete that takedown. But I could be wrong. Well, what do you think, Rich? What's the particular skill set that you feel like would really be looking out for these?
I agree with you, but I disagree with you at the same time. And the reason why I disagree is, for example, when I go into the gym on a daily basis, prepping for a match, for example, I will grapple without punches just to work my grappling. Now, obviously, grappling with punches changes the game, but I don't think me spending some time grappling where I'm not punching and just purely working on my jiu-jitsu puts me at any kind of disadvantage for suddenly I'm in the circle or in the cage and I'm grappling on the ground where punches can be thrown at me. I can't do all my grappling that way, but there can be a mix there. So there can be a time where you turn these things on and off. I just think that stylistically people would change in competition. As a wrestler, for example, I'm not the most amazing wrestler. I didn't grow up wrestling. A lot of people think that I grew up wrestling, particularly being from Ohio, because it's a big wrestling state here. But I didn't. And so I had to learn all the wrestling that I know after the fact when I was actually training. And that was a big me swallowing a lot of pride at the time, because I can remember being, I don't know, purple belt, brown belt in jiu-jitsu, and being able to just out grapple people on the mat, and then walking into a local college wrestling here, and then just suddenly getting mopped by these guys that are just like, because I'm playing by their rules now. And so to go from being like very accomplished in one art to like just like the bottom of the totem pole on somebody else's mat is a very humbling experience. And I had to learn all these skills. And I know other athletes that have been the same way. Like a guy like Matt Brown has constantly reinvented himself during his career as well. Good friend of mine. And so, people that can do that, these are the people that end up succeeding. Now, my wrestling style is like for, like NCAA wrestling. Like if I'm going to get on the mat with somebody that's a All-American or, national champion, I'm going to get trashed if I'm trying to wrestle and out wrestle somebody just wrestling for wrestling. But give me a jab. Let me start throwing a jab in somebody's face. And now that kind of puts me on level playing field when I'm wrestling. So that changes the game. And so I think that when you put something like knees to the head of a grounded opponent, it's just going to change the way that people approach shooting and stuff like that. You don't have to drop to a knee to shoot in MMA like you do in actual wrestling. You can, there are different ways. I'm like my typical entry is like a head inside single. I don't dip down. It typically comes off of my lead hook or something like that because I'm southpaw. And so my style of wrestling has adapted to my striking style. And I don't think I would actually leave myself open to knees to the head on the ground because I just don't wrestle that way. And I think that a lot of wrestlers would end up adapting their style similarly. I mean, this kind of goes across all arts. Boxing, you can't expose the hip in boxing, like if you throw a lead hook the same way that you could in a boxing match as opposed to an MMA match. So it's just about stylistically changing things.
Rich, 2 final questions. It'll just be a 2-part. One, Warrior Series, what will be the future of that if you do relocate stateside or stay here more often? And then 2, I was told that part of you coming to stateside is you're kind of like a talent scout for one championship. How much of that, I guess, is true, or how much are you involved in that?
Okay, so see, now we're getting into like my job description, which if you wanted me to give you guys a job description for what I do for one, it would be very difficult to do, which is why I'm not like the VP of competition or the VP of whatever, because in this company, I have at one point in time helped build out our online store with our merchandise because I used to own merchandise. I've done some talent scouting with the One Warrior Series. I've traveled all over the world looking for talent. I've run a production crew. I'm on this side of the planet actually looking for talent. I'm now working, coordinating with athletic commissions, trying to lay the foundation for our future here. So I don't really know what department in one championship that actually falls under. I guess like much like my MMA career, I'm not the most amazing boxer or kickboxer in the world, but I'm kind of a jack of all trades when you put things together really well. And so I can handle a lot of different things for the company, and I kind of get slated in where I'm needed. As it pertains to one championship, to answer your question, or not one championship, but One Warrior Series, I'm not sure when that's going to come back, because if you guys have watched the broadcasts of our recent One Championship shows, we still are doing events with no audience or limited audience. And these are the COVID restrictions that are the COVID protocols, I should say, put on by the Singaporean government. I think our last event, maybe we were allowed to have 500. I'd have to double check that. But point being is that the arenas are still fairly empty. And that's just an example. To travel right now is somewhat of a tricky process. Like international travel is still a tricky process. Particularly in countries in Southeast Asia and Asia in general. But to be able to travel with an entire production crew, we're probably some time off of that. So as of right now, I don't know what the future of the One Warrior Series would be until we can actually get to the point where we're traveling with a production crew, creating the shows again and stuff like that, and doing that talent scouting. So now that I'm here on ground in the US, like basically I'm here and since I'm over here on this side of the planet, it's like, okay, well, what does the company need? Well, we're opening in the US, and And so we need a foundation laid for a future, which cities are going to go to, as well as we need to start acquiring like talent acquisition on this side of the planet. Now, our head of competition, Matt Hume, is located over here in the US. And so obviously I coordinate with him from time to time, but he leads that for the most part. Like that's his domain. I do help coordinate, like I've coordinated with local promoters here. For example, I'm working with an organization called Rough Nation out of Arizona, who's running a 16-man heavyweight tournament for us, a Road to One tournament. And so hoping before the end of the year, if this tournament closes out, that we will produce a champion from that tournament that'll end up getting signed to one championship. But like everybody else, the beginning of the year, there was some issues with COVID and things like that, as well as, this stuff has kind of trickled in throughout the year. Different states have different protocols and whatnot. So, it's obviously laid some difficulties for us, for them to run the tournament for us. But that's just one of the efforts that we have going on here, aside from what, Matt Hume is just purely actually out scouting and looking for guys at various events and stuff like that.
Man, all this is great stuff. We can't wait till the second half of 2022 to see what you guys are going to do here in the United States. Hopefully you guys unveil some of that here with Goz and I on MMA Junkie Radio. And I really can't wait for December for One Championships 1X card. Going back to DJ, he's going to be doing some Muay Thai, some MMA, some Muay Thai.
Listen, I'll just rewind this. I want to talk as a fan for a second. When One Championship decided to add the Super Series to our events, meaning for the listeners that may be unfamiliar, like we have Muay Thai matches and we also have kickboxing matches. I wasn't a fan. I was like, this is stupid. I'm an MMA. People that tune into MMA want to watch MMA. You don't turn on a baseball game to suddenly watch a quarter of basketball. That's just not how sports work. And so I wasn't a fan. And then we had our first event and I was like, and I'm still kind of like this, I get like this purist mentality, like, whatever, And then we have a couple events and suddenly I'm like, this is actually really cool. Like it's nice to have a super grappling match in the middle of an MMA show or a Muay Thai match, particularly our Muay Thai matches, because the Muay Thai matches are done in the 4-ounce MMA style gloves. And so suddenly I start finding myself drawn, particularly these kickboxing matches and these Muay Thai matches, because they're high paced, high action, and you have this variety in the show. And now on the back end, I was like, okay, you were wrong, Rich. Like this is actually a more exciting event. I think particularly with the TNT events that we had back in April, Rodtang, for example, put on a great show there. He had a match against Daniel Williams, and it was a slugfest. And Rodtang is like, I believe, one of those guys that will be able to somewhat transcend borders and be able to, like, when you watch him fight, he's just that guy. Like he gets tagged and he'll be like sticking his chin out, like, come on, hit me again. And he's exciting, man. He's got that X factor about him. And so he gained a lot of fans here in the U.S. On those events. And now, fast forward, him being one of our most exciting Muay Thai athletes, he's going to be taking on DJ. And we came up with this kind of, I don't know if you want to call it a hybrid rules match, but essentially they're doing a 4-round match where first round is Muay Thai, and DJ is going to have to survive that Muay Thai round in order to take Rodtang into the second round of MMA, and then third round Muay Thai and fourth round MMA. So this is from somebody who used to be a purist, like I don't even want to see kickboxing matches on an MMA card to something like this. I'm really excited for this match in particularly.
Yeah, for sure. Tan Lee is fighting Gary Tonin, and they're still building the card out. So,
what are your thoughts on that matchup?
Well, Tonin obviously has that. You know how they say, "Are you a black belt or are you a legit black belt?" Obviously, he's a legit black belt.
Yeah.
But a lot of MMA fighters, are they work behind the scenes a lot harder than you think. And if you bring in a specialist. And you put in a lot of time, and put yourself in difficult situations, especially like, mounted positions, taken in the back. If Tan Lee puts in that type of work, then I think he'll be comfortable. And a lot of times when that jiu-jitsu specialist, which by the way, I do like Gary Tonin's hands. There's a lot of jiu-jitsu guys that come in and they just don't have much, when it comes to throwing hands. But
I agree.
Who can break the other guy's will in terms of like who can thwart the other guy's main attack first and see if they start to break. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'll be honest. When Tonin came into the league and I saw his first match, I wasn't really impressed with his hands. And every time I watch him compete, man, he gets better and better, and he's more dangerous on his feet. And I think like he's had a couple of matches where he's made it a point like, no, I'm not going to the ground. I'm going to prove that I can stand up here. I think with this match, the way I see this like from the outside is like, obviously, I mean, Gary Tonin is going to be a way better grappler than Tan Le, and I believe that Tan Le has better hands than Gary. And so I think that these two athletes need to come into this match knowing like, here's my strengths, here's my weaknesses, here's the path of least resistance, and stick to that game plan. Because even though I think that Tan Le might be able to survive some of Gary's grappling, you need to draw back on your strengths. And if you get arrogant enough to think like, I can out grapple this guy, it's like, man, somebody like that's Gary Tonin, like, and you talk about black belt and real black belt, but on the flip side, it's the same thing, man. Like Tan Le, his hands are no joke. And so for somebody like Gary, it's like, yeah, he's got some good hands, but I'm a stick to that path of least resistance kind of guy. I have this whole system of how I used to analyze my opponents.
I remember
with this matrix and all this stuff, and yeah. So
I remember asking you once about Plan B, Plan C, and you told us if Plan A isn't working, then Plan B and C probably are going to work even less effective. So you tended to stay on track with Plan A. I think that's what you're telling us here.
Yeah.
And then another thing, tying in Tonin, if I'm not mistaken, I think Andre Feely brought him in to work for Thug Nasty, Bryce Mitchell, I think is his name, and because Mitchell's got really, really good jiu-jitsu. And even though Feely lost, I mean, he got out of some tough positions, and you can just tell when someone puts in the work in their camp. I know obviously, winning's the best, but when you can lose but also show some improvement, like Feely did, you just don't hang your head as low, and I think it was Tonin was the one that he brought in as a specialist, and it worked for him, So Tan Lee's gonna have to find someone that
is on that level. Well, yeah. I think Tan Le has a history of working with Ryan Hall. I think they've worked together.
There you go.
So I don't know if he's bringing Ryan in for this camp. He should. Like that's what I would do. I would have been on the phone yesterday. Like, hey, Ryan.
Him and Tonin are teammates, aren't they, over there in New York? Or
come again?
Aren't him and Tonin teammates out in New York?
Yeah, I don't know, because if they are, then if that's the case, then Ryan's got all the intel on Tan Le. That's going to backfire on him.
Well, Alan Belcher brought in Dean Lister to fight or to prepare for Husumar Paharis, and if you'll recall, when Paharis went after his legs, Belcher said like, he already had some defenses, and not only that, he started attacking Husumar Paharis, so he kind of flipped it on him. But again, it's putting in the work. For some of these specialties. So let's see who kind of does that, I guess. But I'm really looking forward to that fight for sure.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. That's gonna be a fun fight as well. So the 1X card is gonna be a good card, man. This is our 10-year anniversary, and going back to the rule set and everything like this is 10 years of us having a really good safety record with our athletes. No major serious injuries or anything like that. And so when you take those kind of things into account, it's like, yeah, one has a lot to celebrate this year.
I did want to end the interview because we took up a lot of your time, and we really are grateful for the 40-plus minutes you've given us. But this was my one follow-up when we got sidetracked on. I threw a lot of questions at you. Do you have a rate of how many fights have fallen off because of the hydration? Like, has it stung you guys where cards got depleted, or can you say, hey, looking back, 2%, 1%? Do you guys keep track of that?
I'm pretty sure that this is an accurate statistic still to date, but we've never lost a fight due to hydration. We've had fighters that haven't made weight. We've had to negotiate catch weight fights. And again, we have, systems where you can't weigh more than a certain percentage over the actual weight limit. But yeah, we've never lost one to hydration. They always come in hydrated, at least hydrated. We've had athletes that have trouble making hydration. You'd be surprised. Like, for example, when you wake up in the morning, your first morning pee, like that first pee that you take in the morning, is the worst one that you can do, because you've like laid all night, and even if you're hydrated at that point in time, like all the solvents are laying there in your bladder, and you're releasing all that. So realistically, like just as a technique, like you don't want to use your first morning piss to test your hydration. You would want to do your second one to get your system moving. And so athletes will make mistakes like that or whatever. They'll overshoot certain things like, oh, well, I'm hydrated and I can just overeat this week, and suddenly they're coming in like a half a pound over. That's like, but that's just extra food in the belly or something like that, where they just got relaxed or whatever. But yeah, we've had athletes that will do that, and so yeah, we've never lost one to hydration to date.
Yeah.
But it is a learning process for our athletes. And I think that the bigger learning process for our athletes is understanding the psychology of that. Just because you're not cutting weight and you're not outweighing your opponent by an extra 2 pounds doesn't mean that you do or don't have an advantage. Like it's, that this advantage is just in the mind.
Didn't you also once tell us that one of the best ways to burn fat is when you wake up to go for a run without drinking water first? You wanted to go on an empty, empty stomach, empty everything.
Well, water's okay. Well, like hydration doesn't change. Hydration, well, I'll say this. So this isn't exactly a true statement, but hydration doesn't change metabolism as far as like burning calories. But yeah, I mean, even this morning for myself, like I woke up and I typically do, I'm an empty stomach cardio kind of guy. I like doing that. It keeps me lean. I still look the part. People look at me like, oh man, you look like you're in better shape now than you were when you're competing. I'm like, yeah, because I'm walking around it. I'm not training 25 hours a week. This is, putting my body through 25 physical hours of abuse. So, when it comes to that kind of stuff, like, yeah, I'm on the mats for grappling and doing my morning cardios and maintaining a healthy level of physical activity in a week. And so, yeah, but that's one of the ways that I do like to stay lean personally. It works for me genetically. My body responds really well to it. It doesn't even have to be long, but hitting that early morning cardio. That's what I tell people. If you want to weight loss tip for everybody that's listening off topic, if you best weight loss you could do is you want to keep your metabolism high. There are 2 ways to do that. When you wake up in the morning, either eat immediately or do some physical activity. If you wake up and sit around all day, then your body's at this metabolic low state and it'll stay there until you do something with it. So eating is like throwing extra wood on a fire. It just gives the fire something to burn.
Love it, man. Good stuff. I eat right away or go do the cardio. Gotcha.
Yeah. So we've talked about fighter safety and our rules and us coming to the U.S. and weight loss tips. Like next time I come on, if you guys want me to cure cancer, which I'm working on, we even talked about that. I'm working on with my buddy Cody as he's walking across the country. We'll solve some world problems or something, whatever you have on your agenda.
Nice. All right. I'll tell Tammy, hey, we need 45 minutes with this guy because he's just too interesting. But thank you.
Well, listen, if you had 45 minutes, we'd still be a minute 16 short right now. So we're good.
Well, you were late 2 minutes though. So
okay. Oh, come on, man. Like, listen,
we're positive 44 seconds.
Who chooses a studio that doesn't work on every web browser? I'm just saying. I'm just saying. Like,
you gotta keep you on your toes.
Yeah. Well, you did, but that cost me 2 minutes.
All right, Rich. Thanks so much, man. God bless you, and thanks for the chat. And we really learned a lot, like we always do from you.
Yeah, God bless you guys, man. Always fun being on here. Enjoyed the conversations, and hopefully I'll see you all sooner than later.